The clock on the wall showed 11:47 p.m. David pressed his mop across the marble floor of the Grandview concert hall, watching the dirty water swirl into patterns. His shoulders ached. His back hurt, but he couldn't stop yet. 3 more rooms to clean before he could go home. The concert hall was silent now. Just 2 hours ago, this place had been filled with people in expensive suits and sparkling dresses. They had come for some charity event. David wasn't sure what cause they were supporting tonight. He never really paid attention to those details. Rich people had their world and he had his. He pushed his cleaning cart past the main auditorium. Through the open doors he could see the stage. A massive grand piano sat there under a single spotlight, looking almost magical in the dim light. David stopped walking. His hand tightened around the mop handle. It had been so long, 8 years to be exact. Before he could think too much about it, David parked his cart outside and walked into the auditorium. His shoes squeaked against the polished floor. The sound echoed in the empty space. He climbed the steps to the stage, his heart beating faster with each step. The piano was beautiful, black and glossy, probably worth more than everything David owned combined. He sat on the bench carefully, as if afraid he might break something. His fingers hovered over the white and black keys. They were rougher now, these hands. Calloused, stained with years of cleaning chemicals and hard work. But they still remembered. David let one finger press down on a key. The note rang out pure and clear. Middle C. He closed his eyes. Well, well, well. What do we have here? David jumped up so fast the bench scraped loudly against the floor. A man stood at the bottom of the stage steps. Tall, probably in his 50s, wearing a suit that probably cost more than David's monthly rent. His face was flushed red and he was smiling, but not in a friendly way. I'm sorry, sir, David said quickly. I shouldn't have touched it. I'm the janitor. I'm cleaning tonight. Oh, I can see that, the man said, climbing up onto the stage. Let me guess. You're one of those people who dreams about being a pianist, saw the pretty instrument and thought you'd pretend for a moment? David felt his face grow hot. No, sir. I was just Richard Pemberton. The man interrupted, extending his hand but not really expecting a handshake. He pulled his hand back before David could respond. I left my phone here. Came back to get it. And I find the help playing around with a $2 million piano. I apologize. It won't happen again. Do you even know what this is? This is a Steinway Model D concert grand, the finest piano money can buy. Richard walked around the instrument, running his hand along its edge. I bet you've never even been to a real concert, have you? David stayed quiet. Something in his chest felt tight. Can you even play? Richard asked, his voice dripping with amusement. Do you know how to read music? Yes, actually. I can play, Richard burst out laughing. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was the kind of laugh that made David feel small. Of course you can. And I'm sure you're quite talented too, right? Let me guess, you took some lessons in high school? Maybe played at your church? Something like that, David said quietly. This is perfect, Richard said, pulling out his phone. He was texting someone. My friends are still at the bar across the street. They're going to love this. Love what? You, my friend. Tell me your name. David. David. Perfect. Here's what's going to happen, David. My friends are going to come over here and you're going to play something for us. How does that sound? David's stomach dropped. Sir, I really need to finish my work. My shift ends at 1 and I still have, I'll pay you for your time. $100. That's probably what, 2 days of work for you? Play us a song, make us laugh, and you walk away with easy money. I don't think, oh wait. Richard's eyes lit up with an idea. I have something better. Do you know who Chopin is? David's jaw tightened. Yes, fantastic. Here's my offer, and you better listen carefully because I'm only making it once. You play a Chopin piece for me and my friends, any Chopin piece you want. If you can play it perfectly, and I mean perfectly, no mistakes, real artistry, I will give you $500,000. Cash, wire transfer, however you want it. David's world stopped spinning. $500,000. That was impossible money. That was Emily's medical bills paid off. That was moving out of their cramped apartment. That was maybe finally breathing easier. What's the catch? David asked. Smart man. I like that. The catch is simple. When you fail, and you will fail, you stand up in front of everyone and admit that people like you need to know their place. That you got too ambitious. That janitors should stick to mopping floors and stop pretending they're artists. You say it clearly, loudly, so everyone can hear it. That's humiliating. That's reality, my friend. But hey, maybe you'll surprise us all. Maybe those magic hands of yours will play like Rubinstein himself. Richard laughed again. So what do you say? Are you brave enough? Or should you get back to your mop? David thought about Emily, his daughter, 8 years old, born with a heart condition that required constant monitoring, medications, and would eventually need surgery. The medical bills stacked higher every month. His job at the concert hall barely covered rent and food. The debt collectors called every week. Last month, they'd had their electricity shut off for 3 days. I'll do it, David heard himself say. Excellent. Richard was already typing on his phone again. This is going to be amazing. We'll set it up properly. 2 weeks from now. Same stage. I'll sell tickets even. Make it a real event. We'll call it... What should we call it? Dreams meet reality? No, too kind. We'll think of something good. 2 weeks? David asked. You need time to practice, don't you? Though I don't think it'll help much. But I'm a fair man. 2 weeks and same hall. Be ready. Richard found his phone on one of the seats in the front row and headed for the exit. At the door, he turned back. Oh, and David? Don't embarrass yourself and back out. I'm telling everyone about this. It's going to be all over social media by tomorrow morning. You'll look even worse if you run away now. Then he was gone. David stood alone on the stage, the massive piano beside him, and the weight of what he'd just agreed to crushing down on his shoulders. His hands were shaking. $500,000. Or complete humiliation. He sat back down at the piano and placed his fingers on the keys. They felt foreign now. It had been 8 years since he'd played seriously. 8 years since Emily was born. 8 years since his wife died and his whole world changed. 8 years since he'd given up everything to keep his daughter alive and fed. Could he still do this? Did he even remember how? David pressed down and let the notes flow into the empty hall. They were clumsy at first, hesitant. But slowly, like old friends returning, the melodies came back to him. His fingers found their way. The music filled the space around him. For just a moment, he wasn't a janitor. He wasn't drowning in debt. He wasn't exhausted and broken. For just a moment, he was who he used to be. Then the moment ended. David looked at the clock. 12:23 a.m. He still had work to finish. He stood up, walked off the stage, grabbed his mop, and got back to cleaning. But something had changed. Somewhere deep in his chest, a tiny spark of hope had ignited. It was dangerous. It was probably foolish, but it was there. David woke up to his phone buzzing nonstop. It was 6:30 in the morning, and he'd only gotten 3 hours of sleep. He reached for the phone, squinting at the screen. 17 missed calls. 42 text messages. What on earth? He opened the first message. It was from his cousin in Seattle. Dude, you're all over Twitter. What's happening? His stomach dropped. David opened social media and there it was. A video of him sitting at the piano last night. Richard must have filmed part of it without him noticing. The caption read, "Janitor thinks he can play Chopin for $500K. Watch this delusional man accept my challenge. This is going to be entertaining." The video already had 2 million views. 2 million people watching him agree to something that might destroy what little dignity he had left. The comments were brutal. Another person who watches too many movies. Reality check incoming. Why do poor people always think they're special? But mixed in were other voices. I hope he wins. Something about his face makes me think he knows what he's doing. Anyone else notice how he touched those keys? That wasn't random. David felt sick. He put the phone down and walked to Emily's room. His daughter was still asleep, her small chest rising and falling. Medical equipment beeped softly beside her bed. She looked peaceful. That's all that mattered. He had to remember that. By the time he got Emily ready for school and dropped her off, the story had exploded further. Local news vans were parked outside the concert hall. Someone had found his address and reporters were leaving Emily. Messages on his door. David had to take a back entrance to avoid them. His supervisor, Tom, found him in the storage room. David, we need to talk. I know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have touched the piano. If you need to fire me, I understand. Tom shook his head. Fire you? Are you kidding? Do you know how many people are calling about this? The concert hall is getting more attention than it's had in years. Mr. Pemberton already arranged everything with management. 2 weeks from tonight. You're really doing this? I don't think I have a choice now. Can you actually play? Like really play? David hesitated. I could, once, a long time ago. Tom studied his face. There's a story here, isn't there? Isn't there always? That afternoon, David did something he hadn't done in 8 years. He went to the music store downtown. The smell hit him the moment he walked in. Sheet music, wood polish, the faint scent of rosin. It brought back memories so sharp they hurt. An older woman behind the counter looked up. Her eyes widened. My God, David Chen? David froze. The woman came around the counter, moving fast despite her age. She was 70 at least, with silver hair pulled back in a bun. Her hand shook slightly as she reached for him. Mrs. Rodriguez, I thought you were dead, she said bluntly. No, that's not right. I thought you'd become famous. When you stopped returning my calls, when you disappeared, I assumed you'd gone off to one of those prestigious schools and forgotten about your old teacher. David felt shame burn through him. I'm sorry. I should have reached out. Things got complicated. Complicated. Mrs. Rodriguez looked him up and down, taking in his janitorial uniform. Sit, now. Tell me everything. They sat in the small office at the back of the store. David told her about Catherine, about falling in love in his last year of high school, about the pregnancy that came as a surprise, about choosing to stay in the city instead of going to music school, about the wedding they'd planned, then about the complications during birth, about holding his newborn daughter while his wife died in the next room, about the medical bills that started immediately, about Emily's heart condition that was discovered when she was 6 months old, about working 2 jobs, then 3, then finally accepting that music was something he couldn't afford anymore. Mrs. Rodriguez listened without interrupting. When he finished, tears ran down her wrinkled cheeks. You gave up everything. I gained Emily. It was worth it. But now this man is trying to humiliate you on television. He doesn't know who I was. He just sees a janitor who got too confident. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up suddenly. Then we remind you who you were. Starting today, how much time do you have? 2 weeks. But I work 40 hours a week. I have Emily. I can't. You can and you will. What piece are you playing? David hadn't even thought about it. I don't know yet. Chopin. That's what he said, right? Any Chopin piece. Mrs. Rodriguez pulled sheet music from a cabinet. The nocturnes are beautiful. Technically demanding, but manageable. The waltzes are crowd pleasers. What are you drawn to? David's hand reached past the options and pulled out a different score. Etude Op. 10, number 12, the Revolutionary Etude. Mrs. Rodriguez inhaled sharply. David, no. That's one of the most difficult pieces Chopin ever wrote. It's brutal. Even concert pianists struggle with it. And after 8 years of not playing seriously? That's suicide. Chopin wrote it when his homeland was falling apart, when everything he loved was being destroyed and he couldn't go home. It's angry. It's desperate. It's about fighting when you have nothing left to fight with. David looked at her. That's how I feel. It's 11 minutes of technical hell, I know. Mrs. Rodriguez stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, we're going to need help, real help. And you're going to need to practice every single day. Multiple hours. Can you do that? I'll find a way. The news spread quickly after that. Someone had dug into David's past and found his old competition videos from high school. Suddenly the narrative changed. Headlines shifted from delusional janitor to former prodigy resurfaces. People found his acceptance letter to Juilliard. His competition wins. His teacher recommendations that called him once in a generation. The internet exploded with questions. Why was this talented musician working as a janitor? What happened to him? The conspiracy theories were wild. Some said he'd been blacklisted. Others claimed he'd had a mental breakdown. A few suggested the whole thing was a publicity stunt. Richard Pemberton gave an interview to a major news network. Look, I didn't know about his past. But that makes this even more interesting, doesn't it? Here's someone who had talent and threw it away. Now he wants to pretend he can just pick it up again? Life doesn't work that way. You can't abandon something for 8 years and expect to be good at it still. I'm actually doing him a favor, showing him reality. The interviewer asked, but don't you think offering someone $500,000 just to humiliate them is cruel? Richard laughed. Humiliate? I'm giving him an opportunity. If he's as good as people say he was, he'll win the money. But he won't be. That's the lesson. You make choices in life.
He made his.
Now he has to live with the consequences. The clip went viral. People were divided. Some agreed with Richard. Others called him heartless. The debate raged across every social platform. Meanwhile, David was just trying to survive. He worked his shifts at the concert hall, took care of Emily, and every night after his daughter fell asleep, he practiced. The first night was devastating. His fingers cramped after 20 minutes. The speed required for the revolutionary etude was beyond him. He made mistake after mistake. By midnight, he wanted to cry. The second night was worse. Everything hurt. His hands felt like they belonged to someone else. But on the third night, something clicked. Just a small thing. A passage he'd been struggling with suddenly flowed. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even good. But it was progress. Mrs. Rodriguez came to his apartment on the fourth day. She brought another person with her. A younger man, maybe 40, with kind eyes. "David, this is Peter Kim. He's the music director at the concert hall." David stood up quickly. "Mr. Kim, I'm sorry about all the chaos. I know this is causing problems for the venue." Peter smiled. "Problems? We've sold out the event. There are people offering thousands of dollars for tickets. The board is thrilled." He paused. "But that's not why I'm here. Mrs. Rodriguez told me what you're attempting. The revolutionary etude, that's bold. That's one word for it. I want to help. After hours, you can use the practice rooms. The good pianos. The ones we use for rehearsals. You need quality instruments to prepare properly." David felt emotions swell in his chest. "Why would you help me?" Peter looked uncomfortable. "Can I be honest? When I was starting out, someone gave me a chance when they didn't have to. Changed my life. I've always wanted to pay that forward. Besides, I watched your old competition videos. You were brilliant. I want to see if that brilliance is still there." Over the next week, a strange thing happened. People started showing up to support David. Other janitors at the concert hall covered his shifts so he could practice more. A local restaurant sent free meals to his apartment. Emily's school teachers arranged for after-school care. Strangers sent messages of encouragement. Some sent money for Emily's medical bills despite David never asking. The community was rallying around him in ways he never expected, but not everyone was supportive. Richard Pemberton doubled down. He posted updates counting down to the performance. He made jokes. He treated it like entertainment. Each post made David's challenge feel more like a circus act. 10 days before the performance, Emily found out. She came home from school upset. "Daddy, kids at school are talking about you. They said you're going to embarrass yourself on TV. They said we're going to lose our apartment." David knelt down to her level. "Emily, do you trust me?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Then trust me now. I'm going to play piano in front of a lot of people. It might not work out, but I'm going to try my absolute hardest. Because trying is important, even when things are scary." "Were you really good at piano once?" "I was. Can I see?" That night, David played for his daughter. Not the revolutionary etude, something simpler. A Chopin nocturne, soft and beautiful. Emily sat on the couch, eyes wide, watching her father's hands move across the keyboard. When he finished, she whispered, "You're going to win, Daddy." David wished he had her confidence. 1 week left. His hands were stronger now. The muscle memory was returning. But the revolutionary etude was still beyond his reach. He could play sections brilliantly, but putting it all together, maintaining the speed and power for 11 straight minutes, he wasn't sure it was possible. Mrs. Rodriguez watched him practice. "It's coming back. Faster than I expected, but is it enough?" She didn't answer. They both knew the truth. It might not be. 5 days before the performance, David's hands gave out. He was in the practice room at the concert hall, working through the most difficult section of the revolutionary etude. For the 100th time that day, his fingers were flying across the keys, the notes cascading like thunder, when suddenly sharp pain shot through both wrists. The music stopped abruptly. David gasped and pulled his hands back, cradling them against his chest. They were shaking, trembling so badly he couldn't make them stop. Mrs. Rodriguez rushed over. "Let me see." David held out his hands. They were swollen around the wrists, red and inflamed. 8 years of manual labor had left its mark. These weren't the hands of a pianist anymore. They were the hands of someone who scrubbed floors and lifted heavy equipment and pushed cleaning carts for 40 hours a week. "You've been practicing too much," Mrs. Rodriguez said quietly. 6-7 hours a day on top of your regular work? "David, your body can't handle this. I don't have a choice. The performance is in 5 days. You need to rest. Ice these. Take anti-inflammatory medication. Give yourself at least 2 days off." 2 days? I can't afford 2 days. I'm still not playing it perfectly. The ending section keeps falling apart. My left hand isn't strong enough for those octave runs. I need more time, not less. Mrs. Rodriguez grabbed his shoulders firmly. "Listen to me. If you don't rest now, your hands will completely break down during the performance. You'll get on that stage and nothing will work. Is that what you want?" David knew she was right, but the fear was suffocating. 5 days. Just 5 more days and he'd either win enough money to change Emily's life, or he'd humiliate himself in front of millions of people. The pressure was crushing him. That evening, David sat in his apartment with ice packs wrapped around both wrists. Emily was doing homework at the kitchen table. She kept glancing at him with worried eyes. "Does it hurt bad?" she asked. "Just a little sore, sweetheart. Nothing serious. You don't have to do this, you know. The piano thing." David looked at his daughter. She was so small, so fragile. The medical equipment in her room was a constant reminder of how precarious their situation was. Every day was a balancing act between her needs and their limited resources. "I want to do it," David said, "not just for the money, but because I want you to see that it's okay to try, even when things are scary, even when you might fail. What if you do fail? Then I fail. But at least I tried." Emily thought about this. Then she went back to her homework. But David noticed she was smiling a little. The next day, David forced himself to rest. No practicing. It was torture. He kept wanting to go to the piano, to work through the difficult sections, to prepare more. But he made himself stay away. He iced his wrists, took the medication Mrs. Rodriguez had given him, tried to let his body recover. Instead, he watched videos of professional pianists playing the revolutionary etude, studied their hand positions, their techniques, the way they handled the dramatic shifts in the piece. The more he watched, the more impossible it seemed. These were world-class musicians at the peak of their abilities. And here he was, a janitor who hadn't played seriously in 8 years. What was he thinking? His phone rang. Unknown number. David almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Is this David Chen?" A woman's voice, professional, crisp. "Yes. My name is Jennifer Park. I'm a producer for Morning America. We'd like to have you on the show. Tomorrow morning. We'll send a car, cover all expenses. We want to hear your story before the big performance." David's stomach twisted. "I don't think that's a good idea. We're offering $15,000 for the interview. 1 hour of your time. $15,000. That was 3 months of rent. 2 months of Emily's medications. It was real money. Money he desperately needed. "Okay," David heard himself say. "I'll do it." The next morning, a black car picked him up at 4 a.m. Emily was still asleep. David left a note for the neighbor who was watching her. He felt like he was in a dream as the car drove through empty streets toward the television studio. The green room was cold. They put makeup on his face. Someone adjusted his collar. A woman with a clipboard told him to relax and be natural. Easy for her to say. Then he was walking onto the set. Bright lights. Cameras everywhere. The host, Patricia Williams, smiled warmly and shook his hand. She was famous. David had seen her on TV 1,000 times. Now he was sitting across from her, microphone clipped to his shirt. "David, thank you for being here," Patricia said as the cameras started rolling. "The whole country is talking about you. Former piano prodigy. Now working as a janitor, accepting a Billionaire's challenge for $500,000. It's an incredible story." "It's been an overwhelming week," David admitted. "Let's talk about your past. You were accepted to Juilliard. You won multiple competitions. By all accounts, you were destined for greatness. What happened?" David took a breath. "Life happened. I fell in love. We had a daughter. My wife died during childbirth. And suddenly I was a single father with a newborn who had serious medical issues. Music became something I couldn't prioritize anymore. That must have been devastating." "It was, but I got Emily out of it. My daughter, she's everything to me. I'd make the same choice again." Patricia leaned forward. "Some people are saying Richard Pemberton is cruel for making this challenge, that he's exploiting you for entertainment. What do you say to that? David chose his words carefully. I don't think Mr. Pemberton knew my background when he made the offer. To him, I was just a janitor touching an expensive piano. I understand why he reacted the way he did. And honestly, I accepted the challenge. Nobody forced me. But the terms, if you lose, you have to publicly admit that you should know your place. Doesn't that bother you? Of course it bothers me. But that's the deal I agreed to. I'm not a victim here. I'm someone taking a risk for a chance at a better life. Do you think you can win? David paused. The camera was right on his face. Millions of people would see this. He thought about lying, about projecting confidence he didn't feel. But something made him tell the truth. I don't know, he said quietly. 8 years is a long time. My hands aren't what they used to be. The piece I'm playing is extremely difficult. But I'm going to give it everything I have. That's all I can promise. The interview continued for another 20 minutes. Patricia asked about Emily, about his daily life, about his hopes for the future. David answered honestly. He didn't try to be inspirational or dramatic. He was just himself. Tired, nervous, trying his best. When it ended, Patricia walked him off the set personally. That was beautiful, she said. You're very genuine. People are going to root for you, or they'll watch hoping I fail. That's entertainment too, right? Patricia didn't have an answer for that. The interview aired that afternoon. David was at work mopping the lobby of the concert hall when Tom ran up to him with his phone. You need to see this. The video already had millions of views. The comment section was exploding. But something had shifted. The tone was different now. People weren't mocking him anymore. They were sharing their own stories. Single parents. People who'd given up dreams. Workers who felt invisible and undervalued. This man represents all of us, one comment read. Whether he wins or loses, he's already brave for trying. Another said, I've been a teacher for 20 years. I gave up on writing my novel because life got in the way. Watching this makes me want to try again. But Richard Pemberton responded too. He posted a video message. Very touching interview, David. You're good at pulling heartstrings. But emotion doesn't play pianos. Skill does. And you don't have it anymore. I'm actually looking forward to this more now. It'll be a better lesson when you fail. See you in 3 days, 3 days. The reality hit David like a punch. 3 days until he had to sit on that stage and perform. That afternoon, Mrs. Rodriguez made him practice. His wrists felt better after the rest. Not perfect, but better. He worked through the revolutionary etude from beginning to end. It took him 14 minutes instead of 11. He made 7 significant mistakes. The ending was still rough. It's not ready, David said when he finished. No, Mrs. Rodriguez agreed. But it's closer. You're remembering. Your body is remembering. That counts for something. Peter Kim stopped by during the session. He listened from the doorway, saying nothing. When David finished, Peter walked in slowly. I need to tell you something, Peter said. Richard Pemberton has hired 3 professional piano instructors to judge the performance. They'll be sitting in the front row with scoring sheets. He wants it evaluated objectively. Any mistake, any technical flaw, they'll mark it down. David felt the blood drain from his face. So it has to be perfect. Essentially, yes. That's impossible. Even professional pianists make small mistakes in performance. I know. I think that's his point. Peter looked uncomfortable. He's setting you up to fail. The standards he's imposing are unrealistic. I'm not sure he ever intended to actually pay out the money. David sat on the piano bench processing this. Of course. Why would a billionaire actually want to give away $500,000 to a janitor? This was entertainment, a show. A way for Richard to prove some point about knowing your place in the world. So what do I do? David asked. Peter and Mrs. Rodriguez exchanged glances. You play anyway, Mrs. Rodriguez said. You play like your life depends on it. Because maybe it does. Not for the money, but for yourself, for Emily, for everyone watching who gave up on their dreams and needs to see someone try. No pressure then, David said with a weak laugh. That night, David didn't practice. Instead, he took Emily to get ice cream. They walked through the P. Harquet as the sun set. Emily talked about school, about her friends, about a book she was reading. Normal things. Beautiful things. Are you scared about the piano thing? Emily asked suddenly. Terrified, David admitted. That's okay. Being scared means you care. David looked at his daughter, 8 years old and already wiser than him. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just notice now. They both laughed. For a moment, everything felt okay. 2 days left. David practiced until his wrists ached again. The piece was improving, but not fast enough. He recorded himself and listened back. The mistakes jumped out at him. The timing issues, the technical flaws. It wasn't good enough. 1 day left. Mrs. Rodriguez made him rest again. Cramming won't help now. You need to be fresh for tomorrow. Trust your preparation. That night, David couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind running through the revolutionary etude over and over. His fingers twitched against the mattress, practicing the passages. Fear and anticipation twisted in his stomach. Tomorrow everything would change. Win or lose, success or humiliation. Tomorrow the world would watch him try. The morning of the performance, David woke up at 5 a.m. even though he didn't need to. His heart was already racing. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to breathe normally. Today was the day. In 15 hours he'd either change his life or destroy what little dignity he had left. Emily knocked on his door at 6. Daddy, are you awake? Come in, sweetheart. She climbed onto his bed, still in her pajamas. I had a dream about you. You were playing piano and everyone was crying because it was so beautiful. David hugged her. That's a nice dream. It wasn't a dream. It was like seeing the future. Emily looked at him with those serious 8-year-old eyes. You're going to be amazing tonight. I hope so. I know so. You're my dad. You can do anything. If only it were that simple. The day crawled by. David tried to eat breakfast but couldn't stomach more than toast. He attempted to distract himself with television but couldn't focus. Every channel seemed to be talking about the challenge. News shows, morning programs, even sports radio had opinions about it. The narrative had fully shifted now. This wasn't just about a janitor and a billionaire anymore. It had become something bigger. A story about class and dignity and whether people deserved second chances. Social media was flooded with arguments. Some said David was inspiring. Others said he was foolish. Everyone had an opinion. Richard Pemberton gave another interview that morning. He was on a major network looking confident and relaxed. Look, I admire the guy's courage, I really do. But courage doesn't make you a concert pianist. He hasn't practiced seriously in 8 years. He works with his hands every day doing manual labor. Those aren't pianist hands anymore. Tonight's going to be difficult to watch, honestly. I almost feel bad about it. But you're still going through with it? The interviewer asked. Absolutely. He agreed to the terms. I'm a man of my word. If he somehow plays perfectly, I'll hand him the money. But he won't. We both know that. David turned off the television. He couldn't watch anymore. At 2 p.m., Mrs. Rodriguez came by the apartment. She brought Emily a new dress for the performance. Something simple but nice. Emily twirled in it, delighted. Then Mrs. Rodriguez turned to David. How are you feeling? Like I might throw up. Good. That means you care. Listen to me, David. I've taught piano for 47 years. I've seen hundreds of students. You were the best I ever taught. Not because you had the most natural talent, though you had plenty, but because you felt the music. You understood what Chopin was trying to say. That doesn't go away. It's still in you. My hands. Your hands are fine. They're stronger than you think. What you need to trust is your heart. The revolutionary etude isn't just about technical skill. It's about emotion. Chopin wrote it when he was watching his homeland fall apart, when revolution was failing, when everything he loved was being destroyed. You understand that feeling? Use it. David nodded, not trusting himself to speak. At 4 p.m., a car arrived to take them to the concert hall. David had been given the day off from work. He wore a simple black suit that Peter Kim had lent him. Emily held his hand in the car. Neither of them said much. What was there to say? The concert hall was transformed. Red carpet outside. news vans everywhere, photographers with massive cameras, security guards checking tickets. David entered through a side door trying to avoid the chaos, but people recognized him anyway. Some shouted encouragement, others just stared. Backstage was crowded with crew members and officials. Someone put a microphone on David's lapel. Someone else checked the lighting. It all felt surreal, like he was watching it happen to someone else. Peter Kim found him in the green room. "David, good, you're here. I need to explain how this works. You'll be introduced at 7 p.m. sharp. You walk on stage. The judges are in the front row, 3 of them like I told you. Richard Pemberton will be there too, sitting next to them. The performance will be live-streamed. Current estimates say about 8 million people will be watching." 8 million. David's stomach flipped. "After you play, the judges will confer. They'll announce their decision. If they agree that your performance met professional standards with no significant errors, Richard will present you with the check. If not," Peter trailed off. "If not, I humiliate myself publicly and go home. I'm sorry this is happening like this. For what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave." At 6 p.m., the concert hall opened to the audience. David could hear them filing in, the murmur of hundreds of conversations. He peeked through a curtain and saw the auditorium filling up. Every seat was taken. People were standing in the aisles. The energy in the room was electric. In the front row, he spotted Richard Pemberton. The billionaire was talking to the 3 judges, all older men in expensive suits. They were laughing about something. David felt anger flash through him. This was entertainment to them. A game. Emily sat 10 rows back with Mrs. Rodriguez and some neighbors who'd come to support them. His daughter gave him a small wave. David waved back. At 6:45, someone told him 15 minutes. David went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face. He stared at himself in the mirror. Who was he kidding? He was a janitor, a single dad barely keeping his head above water. What made him think he could do this? Then he thought about Catherine, his wife. She'd believed in his music more than anyone. "You make people feel things when you play," she'd told him once. "That's a gift. Don't ever forget that." He hadn't forgotten. He just buried it. But maybe it was time to dig it up again. At 6:55, David stood in the wings. His hands were steady now. The fear was still there, but it had transformed into something else. Focus, determination. He stretched his fingers, rolled his wrists, took deep breaths. 7 p.m. The lights dimmed. A voice came over the loudspeaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this extraordinary evening. Tonight, David Chen, a former piano prodigy who hasn't performed in 8 years, will attempt to win $500,000 by playing Chopin's revolutionary etude. Please welcome David to the stage." The applause was deafening. David walked out into the lights. The stage felt massive. The Steinway grand piano sat in the center, waiting. He walked to it slowly, aware of every eye on him. 8 million people watching online, thousands in this room, all waiting to see if he'd succeed or fail. He sat at the bench, adjusted the height slightly. His hands hovered over the keys. The auditorium fell completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. David closed his eyes. He thought about Emily, about Catherine, about 8 years of sacrifice and struggle and barely surviving, about dreams deferred and hopes nearly crushed, about every person watching who'd given up on something they loved because life got in the way. Then he began to play. The opening notes of the revolutionary etude exploded into the hall, loud, angry, defiant. His left hand pounded out the rumbling bass line while his right hand flew across the keys with cascading runs. The piano sang with rage and passion. David didn't think anymore. He just felt. The music poured out of him like water from a broken dam. All the grief he'd suppressed, all the frustration, all the exhaustion from years of just surviving. It all channeled through his fingers into the keys. The piece was a journey through chaos. Chopin had written it as a cry against oppression, against losing everything you loved. David understood that. He played it like a man who'd lost his wife, his career, his identity, like someone who'd been ground down by life but refused to stay down. His hands were moving on instinct now, muscle memory taking over. The difficult runs that had seemed impossible during practice were flowing naturally. The octave jumps were clean. The timing was precise. Everything was clicking. In the front row, Richard Pemberton's smile had faded. He leaned forward, watching intently. The judges weren't laughing anymore, they were listening. Really listening. David reached the middle section, where the music becomes more lyrical, more sorrowful. This was the part about loss and grief. He thought about holding Catherine's hand as she died, about promising her he'd take care of their daughter, about keeping that promise even when it cost him everything. The emotion in his playing was naked, raw. People in the audience were crying. Not because the notes were perfect, though they were close, but because they could feel what he was feeling. The music was reaching into their chests and squeezing their hearts. Then came the final section. The return to fury, the revolutionary spirit refusing to die. David's hands flew faster, building to the climax. The notes crashed over the audience like waves. Loud, relentless, powerful. He was playing better than he had during any practice session. Better than he'd played in 8 years. Something had unlocked inside him. The combination of desperation and hope and sheer determination was pouring out through the music. Emily was watching with her hands clasped together, tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Rodriguez had her eyes closed, swaying slightly. Even the camera crew seemed frozen, captured by the performance. David approached the final passages, the most technically difficult part. His wrists were screaming. His fingers were cramping. But he pushed through. The music demanded it. He gave everything he had left. The last chord rang out. Powerful, final, definitive. Then silence. David sat at the piano, breathing hard, his hands still on the keys. The entire auditorium was frozen in that moment between the final note and the response. Time seemed suspended. Then the applause started. It began as a rumble and quickly became a roar. People leaped to their feet. Thousands of them, shouting, cheering. The sound was overwhelming. David stood slowly, turned to the audience, and bowed. His legs were shaking. His whole body was shaking. But he'd done it. He'd played the revolutionary etude, after 8 years, in front of millions. Whether it was perfect enough for the judges, he didn't know yet. But he'd given everything he had. That would have to be enough. In the front row, the 3 judges were writing notes. Richard Pemberton sat very still, his expression unreadable. David walked off the stage to continued applause. Backstage, Peter Kim grabbed him in a hug. That was incredible. Absolutely incredible. Was it enough? I don't know. But it was beautiful. That's what matters. Now came the hardest part. Waiting for the judges to decide his fate. David sat in the green room, his hands still trembling. Backstage crew rushed past him, but everything felt distant, muted. His heart hammered in his chest as he waited. The judges had been deliberating for 15 minutes. It felt like hours. Mrs. Rodriguez sat beside him, holding his hand. Whatever happens, you did something extraordinary tonight. I made mistakes. In the 3rd section, I rushed the tempo, and there was that moment near the end where my left hand wasn't perfectly synchronized. David, stop. You played with more emotion than I've heard from anyone in years. That counts for something, but did it? The terms were clear. Perfect performance. No significant errors. The judges had scoring sheets. They'd been hired by Richard to evaluate technically, not emotionally. David's stomach churned. Emily burst into the room, escaping from her seat in the audience. She threw herself into David's arms. Daddy, you were amazing. Everyone was crying. Did you see them? I couldn't really see much from the stage, sweetheart. You're going to win. I know it. David wished he had her certainty. A production assistant appeared at the door. Mr. Chen? They're ready. They want you back on stage. This was it. David stood, his legs feeling weak. Emily grabbed his hand. Can I come? You should probably stay here, honey. No, I want to be with you. Please? David looked at Mrs. Rodriguez, who nodded. Let her go. She should be there. They walked together through the backstage corridors. David could hear the murmur of the audience. The anticipation was thick in the air. When they reached the wings, Peter Kim was waiting. They're bringing the judges up to make the announcement. Richard will speak first. Peter hesitated. David, I want you to know, regardless of what happens, you've already inspired thousands of people tonight. The messages flooding in online are overwhelming. You've touched people. That doesn't pay Emily's medical bills, I know, but it matters. Remember that. David walked back onto the stage, Emily beside him. The audience erupted in applause again. He stood in the center under the lights, feeling exposed. Emily squeezed his hand tightly. Richard Pemberton walked up from the front row. He took the microphone from a stand. The billionaire looked different than he had earlier. Less smug, more thoughtful. He cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, that was quite a performance. Richard paused. I'll be honest with you all. When I made this challenge 2 weeks ago, I thought I knew how tonight would go. I thought David would struggle through the piece, make obvious mistakes, and we'd all learn a valuable lesson about knowing our limitations. David's jaw tightened. Here it came. The humiliation. But that's not what happened, Richard continued. His voice had changed, softer, almost uncertain. What happened was I watched a man pour his entire soul into 11 minutes of music. I watched someone who gave up everything he loved to raise his daughter, and who found a way to channel all that sacrifice and pain into something beautiful. The audience was completely silent. Now I've hired 3 of the best piano instructors in the country to judge this performance. They've evaluated David's playing against the highest professional standards. And I need to be honest about something. I set those standards impossibly high. I wanted to ensure he'd fail, because I was trying to prove a point about people staying in their lane, about accepting reality. Richard's voice cracked slightly. I was wrong. David's heart stopped. What was happening? Richard turned to face him directly. David, I owe you an apology. What you did tonight wasn't just play piano. You reminded everyone watching what it means to have courage, to try even when the odds are against you, to hold on to who you are, even when life tries to strip that away. One of the judges stood up in the front row. He was an older man, maybe 70, with white hair. He walked slowly to the stage and took a microphone. My name is Professor Lawrence Chen, no relation, he said with a slight smile. I've taught piano at the conservatory for 38 years. I've heard thousands of performances. I need to tell you all something about what we just witnessed. The professor looked at David. Young man, your technique was not perfect. You rushed the tempo in the development section. There were 2 moments where your hands were slightly out of sync. By the strictest technical standards, this was not a flawless performance. David felt his hope crumbling. Emily's hand tightened in his. However, the professor continued, his voice growing stronger, I have never, in my entire career, heard someone play the revolutionary etude with more understanding of what Chopin intended. The emotion, the passion, the story you told through that music, it was transcendent. You didn't just play notes. You made us feel what Chopin felt. What you felt. That's what separates a good pianist from a true artist. The professor turned to the audience. My colleagues and I have discussed this. We came here with scoring sheets and technical criteria, but we've decided that judging this performance purely on technical precision would be missing the point entirely. Music is not just about perfect execution, it's about communication, connection, truth. And tonight David Chen gave us all of that. The second judge stood, then the third. They joined the professor on stage. We're unanimous, the second judge said. This performance exceeded expectations, not because it was technically flawless, but because it was artistically profound. The audience erupted. The applause was deafening. People were cheering, crying, standing. Richard Pemberton stepped forward again. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. David, I made you a promise. When you play Chopin perfectly, you get $500,000. The judges have ruled. You've earned this. He handed David the envelope. Their eyes met. Richard's expression was complex. Shame, respect, something else David couldn't identify. I'm sorry, Richard said quietly so only David could hear. I thought I was teaching you a lesson, but you taught me one instead. David took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a check. $500,000, real, actual. His vision blurred with tears. Emily hugged his legs, jumping up and down. We won, Daddy, we won. But David wasn't thinking about the money anymore. He was thinking about the journey, about Catherine, who would have been so proud, about 8 years of struggle and sacrifice, about almost forgetting who he was and then finding himself again. Mrs. Rodriguez joined them on stage, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. I knew you could do it. I always knew. The celebration continued for another 20 minutes. People came up to the stage to shake David's hand, to hug him, to tell him their stories. How they'd given up dreams. How watching him made them want to try again. How he'd reminded them that it's never too late. Later, after the cameras stopped rolling and the crowd dispersed, David sat alone at the piano one more time. The concert hall was nearly empty. Just him and the Steinway. He played quietly. Not Chopin this time, just a simple melody Catherine used to love. A lullaby he'd played when Emily was a baby. Peter Kim appeared beside him. We need to talk about something. What's that? The board of directors met tonight. We want to offer you a position, not as a janitor. As our community outreach director, you'd create music programs for people who think classical music isn't for them. People like you. People who need to know that art isn't just for the privileged. David stared at him. Are you serious? Completely. The salary is decent. Better than what you're making now. Hours are flexible so you can take care of Emily. And you'd have access to practice rooms, instruments, everything. You could perform occasionally if you wanted. Or just teach. Whatever feels right. I don't know what to say. Say yes. The world needs more people who understand that music is about more than technical perfection. You proved that tonight. David accepted. Of course he accepted. 3 months later, David stood in front of his first class. 20 adults of all ages. Some were janitors like he'd been. Others were nurses, bus drivers, retail workers. People who'd always thought classical music wasn't for them. Music isn't about being perfect, David told them. It's about being honest. About taking what you feel and translating it into sound. You all have stories. You all have emotions. That's all you need to start. Emily sat in the back doing her homework. Her medical bills were paid off. They'd moved into a better apartment. Her health was stable, but more than that, she got to see her father doing what he loved. Teaching, playing, creating. Richard Pemberton became a regular donor to the concert hall's community programs. He never spoke about it publicly, but Peter told David that the Billionaire's entire perspective had shifted that night. He'd started funding music education in underserved communities, started questioning other assumptions he'd made about people and worth. You changed him, Peter said once. Maybe. Or maybe he just needed to be reminded of something he'd forgotten. David performed occasionally now. Small concerts. Intimate venues. He never became famous, never toured internationally or recorded major albums, but he touched people, made them feel, helped them remember that art and beauty and passion weren't luxuries. They were necessities. On the anniversary of the challenge, David returned to the same stage. Emily was 9 now, sitting in the front row. The concert hall was full again, but this time it was different. These weren't people who'd come to watch a spectacle. They were people who'd come to hear music, to feel something. David played the revolutionary etude again. It was better this time, more refined. But he never forgot what made that first performance special. The rawness, the desperation, the absolute need to prove that he was still himself, despite everything life had thrown at him. When he finished, the applause was warm and genuine. But the real victory had happened long ago. The real victory was remembering who he was, taking back the part of himself he'd almost lost, showing Emily that dreams deferred weren't dreams denied. That night, after Emily fell asleep, David sat at their old keyboard in the living room. He played quietly, letting his fingers wander across the keys. No pressure, no judges, no cameras, just him and the music. Outside, the city hummed with life. Millions of people living their own stories, struggling, surviving, sometimes thriving. And somewhere among them, David knew, were others like he'd been. People who'd buried their passions, forgotten their talents, accepted that life was just about getting by. He hoped his story reached them, hoped they knew it wasn't too late. That courage didn't mean not being afraid. It meant trying anyway. That failing with dignity was better than never trying at all. David played until his hands grew tired. Then he stopped, smiled, and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. New students, new music. But tonight he'd done enough. He'd remembered how to be himself again. And that, more than any amount of money, was worth everything.